My research interest, my background is applied linguistics and sociolinguistics. I have trained many ESL teachers when I was in the linguistics department. And I work on how multilinguals use language, bilingualism, especially with reference to South Asia. I have done work on things like when bilinguals have so many languages in their linguistic repertoire, which languages do they use and for what purpose? For example, at home, at workplace, in the playground, traveling by bus, in contexts such as this. I have also worked on requesting strategies in English, Indian English. How are they different from American English or British English? What role does the culture play when we are talking about English, when we are using English in the Indian context? So my areas of research are primarily focused on bilingualism as it relates to not just India but also Asia, because I teach a large course. It's called Languages and Cultures of Asian Americans. That's AAS Linguistics 250. And I also teach courses on Asian Englishes. How is English used in Asia, for what purpose, how things have changed, and also on Indian diaspora, how Indians have been living all over the world, more focused on Indians in United States. So one of my primary interests is to see, because we are divided into languages. There's nothing called Indian language. There is either Hindi or Bengali or Marathi or Punjabi. So we have associations in those names and we belong to those associations. So how is Hindi, how is the language, native language being maintained, let's say in the Hindi-speaking community or the Kannada-speaking community or the Gujarati-speaking community? My recent research is with how South Asian students identify themselves. When they meet other students on campus, how do they introduce themselves? Because do they say we are Indian Americans or Punjabi Americans or Bengali Americans? Because they have dual identity now. So I'm sort of curious about whether their cultural background is part of their identity, or do they just say I'm American? Because many kids do that. They don't want to confuse their colleagues, and so they just say I'm American. So is their cultural identity important to them, and do they maintain that cultural and how do they maintain it? And what do they think is the future of their language in the United States, and whether their language will survive beyond this generation? Because if you look at past history, most of the languages have disappeared. At one time, Norwegian was spoken all over the US, or Russian was spoken. Now look at these languages. So, as Fishman called it, that English is a killer language. It kills every language it comes in contact with. Asians have been able to maintain their languages. Chinese, for example, most Chinese kids do know how to speak. Whether they learn to read or write, that's not important. Whether they can speak and understand the language. My questions are what is happening to other Asian communities, like the Korean community, the Filipino community, the Japanese community, and of course the South Asian community, where the language will survive. Most of the kids interviewed on campus are very enthusiastic, and they say, yes, the language should survive because it's important, it's part of our identity, it's who we are. But what are you willing to do? Are you willing to learn the languages? That's where the silence comes in. So they are enthusiastic, but I don't know if that will help save the languages. So these are my three areas of focus as far as research is concerned. But I'm interested in everything that has to do with bilingualism. Sridhar and I, my husband and I, we collaborate on second language research and have written many papers together on that. how second languages are acquired, what is the second language research telling us about language acquisition, and what are some of the prospects from the World English's point of view, because we both work on World Englishes, how English is used in the world, how the paradigms are changing for English use. Most people in India learn English not to speak to foreigners, but to speak to each other, because we are so diverse in terms of languages that the other person may not know my language. And in fact, when I was growing up, I would ask my father, how come nobody speaks my language? And he would say, you will be very surprised if you find somebody who uses your native language, because most people use other languages. So that's what keeps me interested.